Hi, I want to thank you for sitting in on our webinar of Omnidek and how companies go paperless, how they reduce the amount of apps or solve this problem called Appageddon, and start finally bringing their data and their company to life. So I'm going to walk you through a few slides for this presentation and show you a little bit of software as well, and just to kind of showcase just what this new technology on the Omnidek platform can provide you and your small to mid-sized business. Now to get started, there's two strategies that are kind of going on, and we'll kind of highlight the two. The first of which is that companies are going paperless, quote unquote, and they've been doing this for the last 15 years. And there's different strategies that they've used to do that. Some define that as scanning images and records and putting them into like a document management system or SharePoint or kind of a centralized hub. And then also we've been going paperless by moving to more software as a subscription, putting things on the cloud, right? That's where the future is. And by doing so, we're kind of creating a couple of problems, and it was really perpetuated because we used to make decisions where there was an IT guy who was the gatekeeper of all of our technology decisions, and most importantly, and I'll allude to this throughout the presentation, a 3-year technology roadmap, where we were going to be in 3 years and what investments we were going to make and why we were making them to ultimately get to an end game of maybe a matured ERP solution where we were using all aspects of the application we'd already owned. Maybe it was driven by the executive dashboarding and visibility to the different divisions throughout the company, but there was a method to the madness. Well, around 10 years ago, we started outsourcing the IT, and by doing so, we let everybody kind of make these investments at a departmental level, and that created some really nasty friction points inside of most companies, and we're just now starting to kind of see the impact of that moving forward. What we want to do is first start and think about before we all had a phone in our pocket, and think about the way we used to work, right? The first piece of this is that almost everything came through the mail, right? There was literally whole departments that would be nothing but opening up the mail and making copies and stuffing cubbies full of files that needed to be reviewed. Well, we would make copies and put them in the filing cabinet so we wouldn't lose anything. And then we would stuff these manila folders, right? And we'd put them in the cubbies, and they would sit on people's desks, and then ultimately they'd sign it eventually. And there was a big black hole here and lack of controls and processes. But then ultimately we would manually key it into accounting, and then the ERP system would be our single source of truth. It was the representation, albeit a month old. However, it was the actual representation of where we stood at the job level. Well, we then said, you know what, we could automate some of these processes, right? And we started playing whack-a-mole. We said, hey, look, let's handle our invoice routing scenario and make that paperless. Let's automate the project management, the safety department, the service department. And what companies started doing is they started just kind of micro-investing in software as a service. Well, this kind of highlights the problem with that. The first piece of this is that, let's say on average your company has 38 employees, and let's say you have 12 different applications that are running it. That's 400 username and passwords, settings tables, right? Support, maybe synchronizations that might break from time to time. If you upgrade your accounting system, it breaks all the other connections. So these are all things that just create management nightmares for implementing new software. Also, we coupled that because we weren't making larger scale investments. We were putting things on simple subscriptions, even clicking to try certain applications. And what this did is it made us non-committal to the applications we actually owned. This over here shows that on average there's a 2-year app turnover of 38% of your software as a service. New applications that you introduce, others that you get rid of. And this constant and perpetual churn of technology, when you couple that into the remote workforce now that we're now spread thin and spread people working from home, we're trying to implement new process improvements, trying to implement new applications. This is what creates an absolute nightmare and what we believe is affectionately called Appageddon or app overload. The way a lot of these companies go visually, and this is where this breaks down, aside from the management pieces of implementing the software, is that now that we have all these other little applications that drive our business, we now quit putting things in the central filing cabinet and we just let email and put everything in the folder structure and individuals' files on the network. And we kind of lost sight of enterprise content management. There was a day where we actually did job cleanup at the end of the job too, where we would get rid of kind of the trash and then we'd have a kind of a final record representation of that particular project. Now it's all over the place. And although we've picked up a little bit of functionality and efficiency of like now we're importing transactions or maybe automating that import rather than keying it in, we're only saving a couple $100 a month really for that exercise, because that really wasn't the problem, keying things into the accounting system. It was more to do with kind of the automation and the visibility and the process of getting things through the company for review and approval. Now, the worst part about this is that it's not that our ERP system is not our source of truth. It's just that it's still stale. It's still 30 days behind what our actual company is doing, and we're running these reports constantly trying to figure out where do we stand on particular projects. By introducing these additional apps, we created additional places to go run those reports, and we're creating multiple sources of half-truths. And the problem with a half-truth is that it can't give you a full representation of what's actually going on in the company. And any person that's ever tried to bolt on like a business intelligence dashboard, and you've got 12 different apps underneath the hood and 12 different data sources, knows that you can't put all this stuff together very efficiently. And this is one of the problems why when companies went paperless, they created a lot of these hurdles that now we're just now starting to run into when we start to try to get visibility of these processes. So when we look at it and kind of compare the before paperless, where everything was in my ERP and my accounting system as a source of truth, everything was in the file cabinet that was important to the job, and we also used our email communication. It was more of a formally documentable thing. We weren't using it for everything. We were using it sparingly, so email meant something. It was more of a formal communication. Now we've gone paperless, and how does that compare? Well, our ERP data is still stale. We have not overcome that, and now we've introduced a bunch of other applications as half-truths. We also have multiple different places to go store files, right? Where instead of the filing cabinet, we've replaced that with attachments in some cloud-based system that we don't even own anymore. And this becomes a lot of a problem, especially if you have to go find legacy documents, maybe in the case of litigation or something like that, and it's all stored up in the cloud in a bunch of different places. And the most risky piece of this is that we start to become so reliant on technology, all of our communication that used to be really over the phone and via email and formally documented is now stored literally in every single system. And it's now these 4-mile long chat conversations in Slack or Teams or whatever else, where we're talking about everything from the office Christmas party to don't pay that subcontractor because he's being a toot, right? So all of these processes here, I would argue that in our whole 15 years of trying to do this unsupervised without the IT guy, is that we've really created a bit of a nightmare. So a thought exercise that I definitely think you should take from this is going through these questions and just asking them internally, right? And these are good checks as far as where is your company currently in regards to a technology roadmap. The first piece of this is that if a job were to go south, for example, and I had to pull every piece of corporate information for a particular project, maybe if I'm on litigation hold, how many different places would I have to go to find it, right? That's a good exercise, right? It'll start with, okay, maybe the document management system, and then, well, the email system for sure, that's where our communication is, and then Slack, and then Teams, and then our project management system, and then our service system. And you start adding these things up and realizing that, man, this is it's all over the place, and we don't have a really good strategy for it. Also, if my communication was e-discovered in litigation, what would that look like? Is it now chat conversations, informal communication that's now documented and searchable, right? So all of these things are important. Like, what is our evergreen communication strategy? We attempted to try and do that with email policy management, but that kind of went by the wayside when we were just 100% reliant on that. A third step is, how many software platforms have we purchased with the promise of this executive dashboard? We could see all of these really great insights into our company, but you still don't have that visibility. You own the technology that could potentially give it to you, but you still don't have that visibility, right? And every application promises this wonderland and this utopian place where you can see everything at your fingertips, but we're not able to get there. Why? Why is that? That's a good question. Why can't we achieve this visibility? We have more technology now than ever. And then lastly, this is a two-part question. If you can get past the first piece of it, you're in good shape. Who is in charge of our 3-year technology roadmap? Inside the company, who is setting the standards for what technology we purchase and why we purchase it and where are we headed, right? If we don't have one, that's a problem and we should get one, or we should at least start thinking through the exercise. And two, what is the desired end game of our technology? Is it a full implementation of ERP? We've already invested huge amounts of dollars already into our accounting systems. What is it going to be? If our roadmap is whatever Procore puts out in the next release cycle, we'll try to use, right? Or it's whatever my ERP system puts out, I'll try to make that work for my company. That's not a strategic roadmap of anything, right? That's you being pulled into whatever direction a legacy provider wants to get you to pay maintenance. So I think these are some good points just to kind of talk at a high level inside of the company. But what we want to point out is that we somehow bought into, literally as an entire industry, that this calculation of if I buy a bunch of different best in practice applications, plus have them bolted into my ERP system, I somehow am going to equal these beautiful visuals of real-time analytics of my company, so all the decision makers have their decisions at their fingertips. This is not true. What this is really creating, the 12 apps in the before mentioned example, is I created 12 username and passwords, 12 apps to train new employees on, 12 sources of half-truths, a growing software as a service budget, 12 times greater risk of downtime because I've got all these synchronizations, and I've got distributed data sets that's creating logistical issues bolting onto Power BI, Tableau, and whatever BI tool I'm trying to use. So what we can do as kind of small to mid-sized businesses, especially in construction field services, is that we don't have to really think or look too far of, okay, well, what should we be doing? Is that big companies have had this problem really for years, and they just have the budget money and the IT resources to solve it. The solution is having an intranet portal. An intranet portal offers kind of a centralization hub for all process flow, all your file management, all your communication, and everyone knows how to use it that works for the company. Well, enterprise companies build intranet portals. This is what they do. They have full-time development resources that do this for them, right? They have millions of dollars to develop, and they also have years to fully deploy it, right? There's no stopwatch on getting them to roll out their intranet portal. Well, small to mid-sized guys have the problem, but because it's too expensive, and they deem their processes that, well, we're just simpler, we're smaller, we don't have all of those different dynamics, and we also don't have anybody who's an IT resource that works for the company anymore, we're left just buying apps and trying to make our company somehow work within the confines of what that developer in Silicon Valley has said your industry needs to be like. So what Omnidek really was built to do is to be the centralization hub for small to mid-sized businesses. Never before could a company starting at 5 employees even implement an intranet portal. It's just been too cost prohibitive and too technical prohibitive up until this point. But what Omnidek gets right is a simple enough and easy enough interface where anybody in the company today can drag and drop and build any process improvement, build powerful work processes to route through the company. And then once completed, after we've collaborated and chat about it with all the proper people, we now can offload it to ERP. But throughout that whole process, we can analyze the data that's actually flowing through Omnidek and compare that to ERP for rich data sets for your executive dashboarding. Now, one of the other little pieces to this, I'm going to show you this in the software that makes Omnidek really powerful, is that the precursor to data collection and data management is being able to collect data from anyone or anything that would interact with your business and have it never create paper. This is kind of a concept that Omnidek has. So Omnidek has this really unique architecture where we can serve the intranet portal requirement, which is all the forms inside of the company, expense reports, time cards, daily reports, you name it. But we also can face it outside of the company, maybe getting vendor qualification forms, payment applications, right? We can face it to our customers and vendors for warranty portals or requests for service. We can even hook onto IoT devices. Maybe that aggregate yard has a loadware and we need to pull that data, route it for coding and job costing, and then process to accounts receivable, right? Maybe it's the facial recognition scanner that's clocking the guys out in the field, and then I need to be able to pull that, create a work ticket, and have the customer sign off on a daily cadence, right? All of these things now impact the company, and we now have a utility that can leverage that data, spawn powerful work process, give you the visibility, and integrate into ERP. Now, Omnidek truly is a pioneer in this space because generally speaking, without any technical experience, you can implement Omnidek in a couple of hours. You can start with simple things as office manager reporting, pay time off requests, time collection, expense reporting, purchase requisitions. All of these things are just simple use cases that you can very easily build in Omnidek, and we'll show you that in a second. And also, we start at $250 a month, so any company on the planet can afford to implement Omnidek. And what we claim is that Omnidek can do in 6 hours what the current alternative takes 6 vendors, 6 months, and 6 figures to create. Now, Omnidek will truly compete with and potentially replace any third-party application that you're currently using. If the overall goal is to centralize all of our process flow, it's not whether or not Concur or Expensify has better feature sets of Omnidek to do expense reports. Of course they do, that's all they do. However, they're not going to offer you the centralization flow and the intranet portal experience like Omnidek. The reason you would consolidate onto the platform is really fourfold. The first of which is that we can mimic the same question and answer series that's currently going on in the app. You're just building a form and a work process inside of Omnidek, and then we're leveraging ERP and dashboarding for visibility. We have a flexible no-code designer. That means that you don't have to be at the mercy of what a particular provider says an expense report or a work ticket needs to look like. You can make it your own in seconds. And also, this centralization hub of everything flowing into the system creates this assembly line effect inside of your company that everyone just knows how to use, right? The same place where they're doing their expense reports, also where they're doing their daily report and their timesheet as well. So this repetitive nature of how things flow through the company makes it enormously valuable when you're onboarding a new employee, or also when I'm trying to roll out a new process improvement, especially in the middle of COVID where we're not sitting in a training room anymore, we're all on Zoom calls. Well, now it's just another form in the list, another item in your inbox to approve. And the overarching goal here is that we're trying to cure Appageddon by eliminating the software as a service inside of your company. Now, where Omnidek kind of showcases itself is that, there's a lot of little workflow tools, and some of you guys may use them today, like KissFlow, Monday.com, Smartsheet. These are what we would kind of deem as they're simple solutions to put out little fires in the company, but they're not generally built for full enterprise or company-wide deployment. You also have enterprise solutions, which we're very familiar with, SharePoint, Salesforce, ServiceNow, larger cloud-based ERP providers. If you see where Omnidek fits here is that we check all the boxes of the bigger enterprise players. However, we implement with the speed and cost closer to the simpler solutions. And we think that this really healthy straddle of both complexity and simplicity is really what makes Omnidek very compelling and a wonderful solution for companies. So what Omnidek is really trying to create is a new concept of going paperless, where we never create paper to begin with. We collect data from anyone or anything that would interact with your business. We route it through a centralized hub, and we make that data set centralized and accessible via an API so it can feed not only the dashboard reporting on a daily cadence, but we're also feeding the ERP systems as well without any friction points, right? Because we're in pure data, so we're either today matching to import files for job cost commitments for the POs or the AP invoice, possibly the time collection or the work ticket. But as we move to this great migration to cloud ERP, all of those connections now become like interstate travel through API. So your company, if you're considering maybe a move to Acumatica or Sage Intacct or one of the cloud providers, Omnidek effectively just unhooks to one and hooks into the next as you migrate without any field disruption. And more importantly, with the cloud APIs, we can now create truly, for the first time, seamless bidirectional interaction with the ERP system. So I'm done PowerPointing you to death, and now what I'm going to do is kind of walk you through what a day in the life looks like of Omnidek. Now, we like to show our system. So we use Omnidek for literally every process in our company, and I use Power BI as an executive to see every data point literally up to the day on how we're performing across labor code, or potentially how we're doing against service projects, or maybe even form submissions that are going on in the company. I can analyze this, and this is being replicated in real time, sourced out of my ERP system, as well as my document management system. We use Sage Intacct for ERP. If you're to look at my intranet portal as the CEO here, this is every form inside of our company. I would say we're one of the most well-run technology companies because we don't have a filing cabinet and everything's a pure data point. I can answer any question in my company in 2 clicks. To kind of give you a high-level view, this is my form library. Although these are my favorited forms here that are starred, every single department uses Omnidek for different processes. Anything from just boss meetings and HR events, maybe meeting notes in a board meeting, to more daily timesheets, bug UI issues, knowledge-based requests, support tickets from our customers, right? Every process has a process control. In very simplistic example, I'll give you my expense report as one. This is what I generally fill out throughout the month on my phone, where I'll select the month, I'll select my list out of my employees. This is all bolted into my accounting system. Same thing with my GLs or dimensions, as Intact would call it. Let's say, for example, I bought something for $250 and I'll give my description and take a picture of the receipt, tell you if I'm missing it. Let's say I took a trip during this expense report and it's 125 miles round trip to New Orleans. And then it's going to do my math down here. I'm going to sign it electronically with one click, and then I'm going to submit my expense report. This is an example of a very simple process done in Omnidek. Now, to show you how we can go build these, and this is truly not at an IT level or developer level, I can go to the marketplace and search this entire library full of process improvements that are there to act as accelerators for the end users to build new process improvements. Let's take that example of the expense report. If I want to get rid of Concur or Expensify, I simply go to the expense report section, pick which one of these looks closest to the way that I want mine to look, and then I add it to my forms library. Then I can come in and edit this, call this my expense report, and then I can just start tailoring this to make it mine. Maybe I don't call this managers, I call this employees, right? I'm just going to change this here. Maybe I want to add another section in here, and maybe it's another date picker for like date paid or something like that, and I want to configure that to maybe a calendar view or something along those lines. If I want to come down here and do math or let's say hook this up to my categories, I'll select the question, and these are all the tables that are coming out of my accounting system, spreadsheets that I've imported, or maybe other legacy data tables that we're bolted onto. It doesn't matter, we can connect to anything. If I'm going to connect this to my expense accounts, I'm going to pull the description and the GL account, and this is now linked to that lookup table. Now down here you see how we do mileage. This is number of miles, and then my mileage reimbursement. Well, it functions the same way Excel does. If I were to move this over here, you can kind of see I've got an expression that's multiplying at A1 right here times my reimbursable amount, and I'm going to change this to 0.545. So just like the way I would in an Excel calculation, I'm going to multiply these together. Same thing back here when I add up my total expenses, total mileage to give me a grand total. So building forms is very straightforward. We can even do more complex form building. Let's say, for example, let me just kind of build one from scratch here. Let's say, for example, I wanted to do kind of a crew-based daily report. And we want to capture data on a daily basis. I've got multiple divisions, so I want to have a tailored one for each division. Well, we have this really cool thing called a cluster, which allows us to mimic maybe an existing iPad app that we're capturing time in. Well, I could look at that app and say, okay, well, what do I have on the header of it? Well, it's probably a job lookup, an employee lookup, a date, maybe a note section here. And then I just, again, keep hooking these things up. Okay, this is the job. I'm going to hook it to my job list, right? When it comes down to here to building the grids out, it's just like building an Excel table. So let's say, for example, I want to have the employee, their craft, maybe the hours that they worked, and then I want them to spread those hours across a repeating asset, which in this case would be kind of like a cost code. And then I'm going to change this to my labor tab. And then maybe I want to do a similar tab over here, but this is actually going to be their production units, right? And we can do it for per diem or whichever else, right? So the way that I can kind of build this grid lets me rapidly develop literally the same thing we're probably doing in an existing application. We can just simply do that with no coding. So when we start looking at that kind of the end game of this, what we can create is these really elaborate data collection. And what this is really powerful for is that now, if you start thinking the way we've tried to buy technology and we picked which 5 apps, do timesheets, and we picked the one that's the prettiest screen color or it has some bell and whistle that the other ones didn't. Well, we changed this now in Omnidek where we can say, you know what, I know how I want to collect time. Each division kind of does it a little bit differently, so we want to tailor that experience. But I want to do it in respect to what I'm going to see in the executive dashboard up here. So what we can start thinking about, and this kind of plays into the 3-year strategy, is now saying, okay, what makes us successful during a project, and how could I see that through the data collected? and what causes us friction and issues in jobs, and how would I see that on a daily cadence? What would alert me that a job's going south? And when we go through that thought exercise, we start coming to a realization that, okay, there's a baseline data set that we need to capture from the guys out in the field on a daily cadence, so we can now start being alerted and start seeing these trends in our dashboard, so we know what's going on and where we stand on a project, so we can make more corrective actions sooner in the process. Well, you now have a tool to very easily go and configure that. In this case, I can have many crews on here as well. I can have a crew template. I can have as many cost codes that they're putting this against. So all of this is fair game. I can even have the customer sign off on it through the portal if we want to. So all of this is designed to show you that without any coding whatsoever, you can build literally any process inside of your company. Now, the thing that makes it really powerful is that building the form is one thing, but actually building process controls and approvals is another. Well, the way that you build process controls in Omnidek is really powerful. We actually ship the application with this hierarchy structure, and you can leverage it throughout the work process that you build. Let's say, for example, I've built that purchase request, and I want to build a workflow for it. And I've got that hierarchy built where the crew, the team members kind of sit in the different buckets. Well, I can build a work process that says, okay, if this is the expense report or the purchase request, I'm going to have a rule and says, okay, anybody that submits a purchase request, your direct supervisor has to look at it. So you could have 100 divisions inside of your company. You would build a hierarchy node as the first level of approval, select the people that are part of that hierarchy, and then you maybe give them a $1,000 threshold. Okay, if it's a condition, so that means total requested amount over here is greater than a number. Then if it's true, it needs to go get another approval from VP of Finance. Once they've approved it, then it can go to accounting. If it's under that, you can just go to accounting, right? So I'm very easily and very digestively and graphically building work process in respect to my hierarchy structure. Now, the nice thing about building your workflow at the hierarchy level is appreciate the thing that makes Omnidek very scalable inside of the company and why our customers have 30, 40, 50 processes inside of their portal is that when I get a new team member, I may onboard them through the new hire portal. I just move them to wherever they're going to be in the company, and they inherit security access on what they can see, what forms they have access to. When they go run reports, it'll dictate what they can see from that standpoint, but it also can dictate where their purchase requests go or where their time off requests can go. And all of this is really, really wonderful. And it's not an either or. You can leverage this or not leverage it. So it's designed there to be kind of a helper for building these workflows in a very digestible and very simple manner. Now, you appreciate building the form is very easy. Once you get a hang of how to build workflow, it's very graphical, very easy. And this is what you create inside of your company. A single page application that never refreshes, it's being live updated. And I've got one inbox for every single process. When I come in here to my inbox, this is a day in the life. This is me talking with my administrators here about a new deal that we just booked and how they need to book it accordingly. I'm also approving an out of office request here, and that's moving on to the administrative team, as well as an expense report request as well from Lauren that I'm approving and job costing, right? Everything is in one system. So whenever we start talking about this, not only can I have powerful conversations, even inviting more users in to the conversation here, but we have a nice alternative, I would say, to what we're experiencing where we're losing things in email or we're bouncing between multiple applications to go and do our work. Now, the last two pieces of this is where I would say we're the file management piece as well, but we're having a new take on that that's more data driven. The first piece of this is what we call insights, or which is a fancy word for a report, but it's where you can condition certain data elements to be alerted when they happen. Like these are 14 new timesheets for the division that I supervise, right? These are 4 new customers that came in since I last checked this, 2 new sales orders. So if I were to come in, and let's say, for example, I want to just go check on maybe expense reimbursements that have come in. This is just a grid of all the expense reimbursements. Well, if I came in here and said, okay, I want to group this by expense type and see, how much did I spend on meals and entertainment last quarter or something like that, right? If I see something like, hey, Great American Cookie for $75, what is this? Well, I can click on it and see the receipt and actually see what was bought. And then I can say, hey, Allison, why did we spend $80 at Great American Cookie? Well, I can have this conversation right here with her, and now we're actually talking about this particular incident, which is better than a Slack conversation because the story is going to be associated to that form forever. So the same way that I view expense reports is also the same way that I would view timesheets. I can group and sort and filter and kick out to Excel. So it's a wonderful way to look at data almost like as kind of a log transaction, and you can condition each one of those filters. We then roll all this stuff up into what we call a channel. We generally think about it kind of like the job file, or the equipment file, the vendor file. Well, channels for us is a data reference point. The same thing like if I did an @ symbol or a hashtag symbol in social platforms. If I go and select a customer, for example, this is the customer's channel. This is all the data from the customer out of my accounting system. Here's all the form activity. So what's the last thing we did with them? Well, there's a timesheet here from Adam, and I can see just because they were mentioned right here on the form, I can ask Adam a question. Hey, did we get Jordan's answers issues? I'm about to jump on a phone call with him. Also, I can come down here, and this creates a really nice elaborate folder structure. So this is 25 timesheets that we reference this customer on. Here's the original project request. Where did they initiate from? Well, this is not only the story, but the actual project request here front and center. So if you think about this, what makes this a very cool alternative is that the more things you commit to the intranet portal, you're paperless. You have a more powerful engine than document management companies give you today. Everything's a data point and a data element, and all of this is accessible via API. Now, everything I've shown you here is out of the box. You can create on your own. I'll give you one last wrinkle, and this is where we start talking about bringing in subcontractors and vendors to do work with you, new hires. I'll go through that. One of the cool things that we build in Omnidek is this ability to build portals, portal experiences for the different people that would interact with you. In our case, that's it's a circle. So I've got customers and data room for investors, new hires. Well, the way that Omnidek administers is that I can build a portal for any kind of relationship. So let's take that new hire one, for example. Well, I built this portal and said, hey, welcome to the Omnidek new hire portal. I want anybody in the new hire portal bucket to get this view, and I want them to read this message, and I want them to be able to see and fill out the new hire packet, and if they've got vacation scheduled, tell us about it. So the act of me onboarding, when you come and work for Omnidek, the first email that you get in your Omnidek inbox is actually the invitation to the portal. So what that looks like here is I'll type their email address in, I'll give them a free portal user, and I'll invite them to come into the new hire portal. They then are prompted with kind of a walkthrough registration where they set their e-signature and their password. When they log in here, this is the experience that they get, just like I built them. But when they come to fill out their new hire packet, this not only has forms, but we even support embedded PDFs as well. So this is actually the W-4 and all the other supporting documents that are more fillable PDF oriented. They're just now doing this inside of the Omnidek application. When they submit this thing on, they complete their packet, it's going to route through that inbox. HR is going to get it. If they have a question, they can chat back with that particular representative and, hey, take a better picture of your license or whichever the case. But this is a completely paperless process. Once they're onboarded, I move them out of the new hire bucket accordingly, right? And then I just move them to wherever they're going to sit in the company, just like this. So let's say, for example, I just onboarded somebody. I'm then just going to move them out of the new hire bucket and then move them. I can move John Smith wherever I want in the company. Maybe he's going to go into accounting or administration, right? So all I do is I move people around the org chart and they inherit how I want them to visualize and work with the company. So Omnidek is a tremendously valuable product because everything I'm showing you here you can implement in clicks and in afternoons. Especially, it's a great tool. You can put somebody, an administrator, somebody in the company in charge of continuous improvement and literally go back and look at every process that flows through the company and start building a really powerful tool to be able to automate your company, reduce the amount of apps it takes to run your company, and really go paperless in its truest form. So this is Omnidek. I appreciate you taking the time to sit on this webinar. If you have any questions, please follow up with us. One of the sales people from the webinar will touch base with you as well. And then we'll have a copy of this recording accessible to you. So again, my name is Chris Jordan. I'm the CEO and founder of Omnidek, and I appreciate your attendance here in this webinar. Thanks.